The 4 hours that could determine Boris Johnson's future. The former Prime Minister is about to face questions and evidence about what he told the Commons about lockdown parties and, crucially, what he was told. He's already admitted he did mislead Parliament. Can he prove he didn't do it on purpose? We're about to find out. Also ahead, a shock rise in inflation, what's behind it and the reaction to it. In breaking news this lunchtime, multiple injuries and a major incident declared after a ship tips over at Leith Docks. Water companies are slammed for the state of the industry as customers are warned their bills will go up to stop sewage being pumped into our rivers and seas.
The baby in 5 minutes.
And it's free?
Yep, free, completely free. Not even allowed to accept tips.
And the former doctor and the former police officer going head-to-head at the BAFTA TV Awards.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hussain.
Good afternoon. In half an hour, a former Prime Minister accused of misleading Parliament will begin giving evidence at a hearing that could determine his future in politics. Boris Johnson has already admitted he did mislead Parliament over rule-breaking lockdown parties in Downing Street. Today, we'll examine whether he misled the Commons and the country knowingly or recklessly. Among the evidence submitted for this afternoon's televised questioning is the accusation he was warned not to claim all guidance was followed, a warning he then ignored. If the committee finds against him, he could end up losing his seat. Here's our political reporter, Amy Lewis.
Why should the British people believe anything you tell them?
Judgment Day, a day that could determine the rest of Boris Johnson's political career. The former Prime Minister, who has survived so many scrapes in the past, faces his biggest test yet. He accepts that he did mislead MPs about COVID rule-breaking parties at Downing Street when he was Prime Minister, but today his peers will question if he did so knowingly or recklessly. Ahead of today's hearing, the committee has published 110 pages of evidence. Within that, it's been revealed that Cabinet Secretary Simon Case denies telling Boris Johnson that all rules and guidance had been followed. Key aide Martin Reynolds says he raised concerns about Mr Johnson saying the rules have been followed ahead of Prime Minister's questions. And a number 10 official claims Johnson could have shut down parties, but didn't. For Rishi Sunak, questions about his former boss won't go away, or the fines they both received for breaking COVID rules.
The only criminal investigation he's ever been involved in is the one that found him guilty of breaking the law.
I had no advance knowledge about what had been planned, having arrived early for a meeting.
Labour MP Steve Reid was in the Commons when the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson told MPs COVID rules had been followed.
Well, Boris Johnson told us, first of all, there were no parties. Then he told us, when it became obvious there were parties, that he hadn't been at them. Then it became obvious that he had been at them. And then he didn't know that they were breaking the lockdown rules, which he had actually written.
There are 7 MPs on the Cross-Party Privileges Committee with a Labour chair and a Conservative majority. In less than half an hour, Boris Johnson will swear an oath on the King James Bible. The televised grilling is set to last for up to 4 hours, during which time he can confer with his taxpayer-funded legal team, but will have to answer the questions himself. He faces being suspended from the Commons if MPs decide he deliberately misled Parliament, and that could trigger a potential by-election in his Uxbridge constituency.
We need honesty and we need the people to show us the right way. Boris Johnson hasn't really showed us anything.
That's all I can really say, to be honest. He was just rubbish.
I think there's no other leaders we can see in any other party who can lead from the front, you know, even in other parties as well. So I think he has a good chance.
We'll have to wait until the summer for the final verdict. Whatever your thoughts are on Boris Johnson, he certainly provides political theatre. Amy Lewis, ITV News, Westminster.
Our political editor, Robert Peston, joins me now. It is about to begin. How do you think this will end for Boris Johnson?
Well,
I'm not going to prejudge what is the most important part of this process of finding out whether or not he deliberately, recklessly lied to MPs when he said on a number of occasions there were no parties and all the guidance was followed, all the rules were followed. We know that is not true. He, in fact, yesterday in his written submission to the committee admitted that he'd lied, that he'd misled. But his case is he did it by accident. And he says that he was told by his officials that rules were followed. Now, let's be absolutely clear. The Committee of MPs, where there is a majority of Tories, start by being highly sceptical of that position, because we've already seen a paper from them in which they point out, completely reasonably, he drafted the rules, he told the public to follow the rules, and he attended at least 5 parties. And he's confirmed that he attended at least 5 parties. So essentially what this afternoon is going to be all about is he is somehow going to have to persuade them that he was attending these parties without knowing what they were. Most people would say that flies completely counter to common sense. And so, as I've said before, I think this is a pretty sticky wicket for him.
OK, from the former Prime Minister to the current one, and both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, 2 former Prime Ministers, have said today, this morning, that they will vote against Rishi Sunak's new trade deal for Northern Ireland on Brexit. How difficult a position does that put the current Prime Minister in?
So the Prime Minister, all Prime Ministers, would prefer to win votes on the basis of support from their own side. And there is a risk because the European research group of Brexiter Tories, not as powerful a force as it was, let's say, a year ago, but that group of MPs, some of them are going to vote against the Prime Minister. So what I shall be looking out for is whether or not the Prime Minister, in a slightly embarrassing way for him, only wins on the basis of support from Labour and indeed from the Scottish National Party, which has also confirmed that it will be voting with the government on this issue. But the real nightmare for the Prime Minister is he would say he has made some progress since Boris Johnson, since Liz Truss were Prime Ministers, in bringing the party together, ending all those awful internal wars. And what's happening today, both with the Boris Johnson interrogation over whether he lied and with the Tory party being split again with Brexit, is that the public are being reminded yet again of all those problems in the Tory party, unlawful parties, splits on Brexit, that the population, much of it, hates.
Robert Peston, thank you. And Boris Johnson's appearance at the committee is due to start, as we've been saying, at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So for live coverage and analysis, head to itvx.com and scroll down to the newsreel. The cost of living has risen again, but this time it's a rise no one saw coming. Inflation rose to 10.4% last month, despite predictions it was set to fall. Shortages of vegetables in recent weeks are largely to blame for the increase, pushing food prices to their highest rate in more than 45 years. Ian Woods has the details.
£1.99. Where you used to be able to get 6 months ago £1.20, £1.30.
The inflation rise may have taken city economists by surprise, but NHS workers like Sharon Honey, who feel price increases the hardest, may be more in tune with cost of living pressures.
I think food prices have increased dramatically. Just go and buying a loaf of bread, you used to be able to get a loaf of bread for, say, 99 pence. Today it's £1.40.
Shortages usually push prices up, and we've seen supermarkets having to ration tomatoes, peppers and other salad products. But dairy items have risen sharpest, by more than a third in the past year. And it's not just the cost of producing food which has forced prices up.
We've seen supermarket groups like Asda and Tesco increase workers' wages 3 times in a year. So you've got the underlying food price going up, you've got workers' wages going up. All of this means that the costs of food and drink in restaurants and in shops is absolutely soaring.
The annual rate of inflation peaked at 11.1% in October last year, a 41-year high. It then began to ease in subsequent months, falling to 10.1% in January. going back up to 10.4 is a blow to those who predicted it could drop to single figures, and a long way off the most recent official forecast, which said inflation would fall to 2.9% by the end of this year.
Really, there's not a lot we can do about it. We're hoping as an industry that cost prices come down at some point, but it's unlikely that they will come down much from where we are today.
The inflation news increases the likelihood of the Bank of England announcing yet another rise in interest rates tomorrow. Spring may be just around the corner, but the economic outlook remains bleak. Ian Woods, ITV News.
I'm joined now by our economics editor, Joel Hills, who's at the Treasury. What could today's inflation news mean for tomorrow's announcement on interest rates, Joel?
Well, for what it's worth, Nina, investors now think an increase of 0.25% is absolutely nailed on. Just yesterday, the sense was that the Bank of England was probably going to sit on its hands for at least another month. This lunchtime, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has issued a statement. He's saying falling inflation is not inevitable. We need to stick to our plan to halve it this year. Prices continue to rise faster than pay. They're likely to do so for some months to come yet. The Chancellor's statement reminds us, Nina, that the squeeze on our living standards, which we're experiencing, would be so much worse were it not for all the taxpayer support on offer. £3,300 for a typical household. That's the Treasury estimates. Most economists expect the headline rate of inflation will, though, fall really quite sharply and will end up at the end of this year at below 4%. The reason they're confident this is going to happen is because the international market price of gas, electricity and oil has eased very significantly in recent months. We've also seen international prices of food commodities like wheat, maize and barley fall rather significantly, and international shipping costs have also collapsed. All of these things will hopefully slow the rate at which prices are rising. But the direction of travel looks clear. The Bank of England, though, still expected to raise interest rates. It's doing so for two reasons. Firstly, there's some evidence in these data that companies continue to raise their prices to protect their profits, and that workers are asking for very strong pay rises and in many cases getting them. Both of these things make it very hard for the bank to bring inflation back under control.
Joel Hills, thank you very much. Thank you. To the breaking news this lunchtime, and the emergency services are dealing with a major incident at Leith Docks after a huge ship tipped over. 25 people have been injured. 15 of them are in hospital after the vessel began to tilt this morning. It's now listing at a 45-degree angle. Police said it had become dislodged from its holding at Imperial Dock on the outskirts of Edinburgh. Our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith is in Leith. What more can you tell us, Peter?
Well, Scotland has been battered by heavy winds overnight. As you can probably see and hear, those heavy winds are still coming in. And it was just before 8:30 this morning that the phone call was made to say the boat, the ship, the vessel behind me had been affected by this snapping off from its moorings. As you can see, it caused the vessel to tip over at a 45-degree angle. Now, there were people on board this research vessel. We believe it is a research vessel, and 25 of them were injured. As you say, 15 of them have now been hospitalised. They're being treated for their injuries at local Edinburgh hospitals. 10 of them were treated on the scene itself, at the scene itself. And we've also heard that the local NHS dispatched 5 ambulances, an air ambulance, 3 trauma teams, special operations team, 3 paramedic response units and 1 patient rescue vehicle. They are still treating people on board at the moment. We've seen some people be taken away in stretchers. An air ambulance has taken off, but we have now, just in the last hour, had an emergency declared. This is a serious situation. The local hospital, the Edinburgh Infirmary, is saying that they have declared an emergency situation because they don't want people to come into the A&E if they don't have to, because they expect they'll be busy treating people who were on this boat.
Peter Smith, thank you very much. Thank you. The man accused of fatally shooting 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell has told the court he wasn't doing anything different on the day of her death last year. The jury has seen CCTV footage of Thomas Cashman's movements on the day she died. The 34-year-old is accused of killing the schoolgirl in her home in Liverpool, a charge he denies. Chloe Keedy is at Manchester Crown Court for us this lunchtime. What else has he had to say today, Chloe?
Well, Thomas Cashman has spent the morning answering questions about what he was doing during that day leading up to the shooting. The jury was shown lots of CCTV footage of him driving around the Dovecot area of Liverpool. Now, the prosecution claim that is evidence that he was scoping out a murder, that he was essentially tracking the movements of a man he intended to kill that night. But today, Thomas Cashman repeatedly denied that. Yesterday, he told the court he was a high-level cannabis dealer, making between £3,000 and £5,000 a week. And today, he said his movements were just typical, he said, of a local lad who sells cannabis. If they went back on all of the CCTV, he said they would see the same movements every day. Now, he told the jury that he was at a friend's house smoking a spliff at around the time of the shooting, which was at 10 p.m. on the 22nd of August last year. Now, the prosecution claim, shortly after 10 p.m, he went to the home of a woman he knew and confessed to the shooting. But he denies that. He says that woman has lied to police because she was obsessed with him and because her boyfriend owed him money for drugs. Well, Thomas Cashman denies all of the charges against him and he will continue answering questions here this afternoon.
Chloe Keedy, thank you. It is 20 years ago today our colleagues faced a deadly attack while covering the war in Iraq. The team were caught in crossfire between American and Iraqi forces as they moved towards the city of Basra in the south of the country. Correspondent Terry Lloyd and translator Hussein Osman were killed, while camera operator Fred Nirak remains missing. Next, what will it take to sort out our water and cut down on sewage spewing into our rivers and the sea? A new report from a House of Lords committee is recommending barring water company bosses from working in the industry if they are found to be responsible for serious pollution. It accuses water companies of maximising profits over the environment, but warned customers will face higher bills to pay for improvements. Our science editor Emily Morgan is by the River Mole in Surrey and just sent this.
I am standing in an area of natural beauty. I'm at the foothills of Box Hill. The birds are tweeting and I'm on a stretch of the River Mole. It's a 50-mile river. It is beautiful, but it is being damaged by sewage being pumped into it. You can see I'm standing in front of a treatment works. There is a pipe just down there. You probably can't see, but then there's murky water coming out of it, and much of that is sewage. And I'm standing with campaigner Simon Collins. Simon, tell me what is happening here.
Well, Emily, this is Dorking Sewage Treatment Works, as you can see. And the cloudy, murky water coming out of it is a mixture of treated waste, but also untreated waste. Technically, they're allowed to discharge waste during times of extreme rainfall. That's what the permit allows. And of course, we haven't really had extreme rainfall for a good length of time. And yet this sewage treatment plant has been discharging continuously for over 100 hours so far. And overall in the catchment, the 9 sewage treatment works have discharged 4,000 hours of untreated waste into the river, which compares very badly with last year, because for the whole year it was 6,000 hours. Right. So we're already up to 4,000.
So a lot.
Yes.
Just briefly, tell me what the problem is. Why does it matter?
Well, I guess what we're looking at here is untreated waste. Now, to us, of course, that's gross, but for algae and bacteria, it's kind of food. That algal bloom uses up oxygen, and of course, a deoxygenated river is really bad for fish. So it's been known to cause fish death, and then that knocks on to insects and birds, and the whole ecosystem, the whole food web is eventually degraded.
So devastating for the whole ecosystem. Now, the report has called on water companies and the regulator to do much more. They say their focus is on investing and trying to upgrade infrastructure, but the question is, when will it happen?
Emily Morgan reporting there. Finally this lunchtime, a former doctor and a former police officer will go head-to-head at the BAFTAs in May after their TV dramas won the most nominations. It's Adam Kay's dark NHS drama This Is Going to Hurt versus Tony Schumacher's police series The Responder. With more on that and the on-screen stars that have made it to this year's shortlist, here's Faye Barker.
For the baby in 5 minutes.
And it's free?
Yep, free, completely free. Not even allowed to accept tips.
Life in the NHS through the lens of a junior doctor. The hit drama This Is Going to Hurt, nominated for 6 BAFTAs.
We need to go.
He doesn't have any food.
Look at the size of him.
And the life of a frontline police officer in The Responder also has 6 nominations. The writers behind both these series dramatising their own first-hand experiences.
Pick your battles.
What does that mean?
It is definitely true that a lot of the dramas are ones in which it speaks to issues within our society. I think these dramas can really be sort of powerful testimony because it can help shine people's issues to light. I think it says something about our country, and they are also completely absorbing.
Just go for a walk around the block or something. Put your phone down.
Kate Winslet's portrayal of a mother witnessing her daughter consumed by social media in I Am Ruth is another reflection on real life. The Oscar-winning actress alongside a strong field of female talent, including Billie Piper, Sarah Lancashire and Imelda Staunton.
These seats are lovely.
Gary Oldman's performance in Apple TV's Slow Horses has earned him his first TV BAFTA nomination. So too for Daniel Radcliffe, recognised for his comedy performance as Weird Al Yankovic.
Another one rides the bus.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
5 nominations for The Crown serves as another reminder of the growing presence of streaming services such as Netflix. And in a year of political drama, Susanna Reid's Good Morning Britain interview with Boris Johnson is nominated for news coverage.
What else should Elsie cut back on?
In entertainment, it's Saturday night stalwarts Anton Deck battling Strictly Come Dancing. Winners of the Craft Awards will be announced next month and the TV Awards in May. Faye Barker, ITV News.
Mary will be here with the evening news at 6:30 from me. Bye-bye.